Hi, everyone. I'm really glad you're here. If you're leading people right now, you're carrying a lot. So the fact that you made time for this conversation tells me something about how seriously you take leadership. We're going to give it just a few seconds for additional folks to join in, and then we'll jump in. All right. Thank you for being here. Today, we're talking about how to build a culture that chooses stretch. This session is designed for people leaders, HR partners, senior leaders, and managers who are trying to strengthen culture and performance at the same time without burning people out in the process. What are we going to cover? Well, in the next 15 minutes, we're going to focus on three things. First, a few mindset shifts that help leaders see discomfort differently. Second, practical leadership behaviors that make stretch healthy instead of harmful. And third, clear culture expectations that allow growth to be sustained over time. My goal is simple. I want you to leave with language and clarity you can use immediately. Whether you're coaching managers, shaping leadership development, or setting expectations across your organization, because clarity builds capacity. So, why does this matter now? Well, I think if you're leading people right now, you may be experiencing very real tension. Why? Because on one hand, organizations need strong leadership capacity, adaptability, and decision making. On the other hand, people are already carrying a lot, and many leaders are trying to protect their teams. But here's what I know after coaching hundreds of leaders. When organizations overcorrect toward comfort, performance quietly declines. Not dramatically, just gradually. And gradual decline is dangerous because it feels manageable until it isn't. We hear things like, my team is already stretched. This organization is good at what they do. I don't want to push them. Or I don't want to add more discomfort. Now, while those instincts come from a good place, comfort compounds, and so does stagnation. On the other hand, growth requires stretch, and stretch requires leaders who are willing to walk with people through discomfort, not remove it entirely. We're not in the business of protecting comfort. We are in the business of building capability. So the real question becomes, how do we build cultures that prioritize both well-being and growth? Well, I think it starts with mindset. Here's a few mindset shifts I want you to take into consideration. Number one, comfort isn't the goal, capacity is. Comfort feels appealing because it's familiar and safe. But organizations don't grow because people stay in what's familiar. They grow because people try and learn and sometimes get it wrong. As leaders, we're not in the business of protecting comfort. We're in the business of building capability. That means creating space for learning, decision making, and even failure. In a culture that chooses stretch, people are trusted to make decisions. Mistakes are treated as information, not indictments. Confidence grows through experience, not avoidance. Leadership capacity expands when people are allowed and expected to stretch. Okay, number two, psychological safety is not the absence of challenge, and that distinction matters. Psychological safety doesn't mean everything feels easy. What it does mean is that people feel safe, safe to speak honestly, try things, ask for help, and recover when things don't go perfectly. Psychological safety is not a leader only responsibility. Leaders create the conditions. Adults choose how they show up in those conditions. In a stretch culture, people know that their voice matters. They know that feedback is a part of growth. It's not a threat to growth. And learning and recovery are built into the system. That's how trust is built, especially when the work is hard. Mindset shift, number 3, is that discomfort is not a problem to eliminate. Now, not all discomfort is bad, but there's a big difference between stretch and strain. Stretch builds muscle, strain tears it. A healthy stretch culture pairs challenge with clarity and support. An unhealthy culture creates chaos and calls it high performance. When leaders help people understand why a challenge matters and what support exists, well, then discomfort becomes meaningful. Short-term discomfort can lead to long-term development. Staying comfortable might feel easier, but it limits both individual growth and organizational potential. So let's transition over. We've been talking about your mindset shifts. Let's talk about practical leadership behaviors that we can practice in a stretch culture. The first one is to define the current reality. One of the most stabilizing things a leader can do is clearly define what's actually happening. In those moments, clarity reduces anxiety. When leaders avoid defining reality, teams invent their own version, and it's almost always worse than the truth. In stretch cultures, leaders regularly name what's changing and what's not. They connect day-to-day work with the bigger picture, and they help people see how their role contributes to closing the gap between today and the future. So that's defining current reality. The next behavior is set clear expectations. Vague expectations create frustration. So phrases like take ownership and be more proactive might sound positive, but they don't tell people how to succeed. In a stretch culture, leaders reduce guesswork. They clarify outcomes, timelines, and standards for good and great. Pressure actually comes from ambiguity. Confidence comes from clarity. Your third behavior is give timely and specific feedback. Feedback avoidance is one of the most expensive habits in organizations. It's expensive because it delays growth, and delayed growth becomes underperformance. So when feedback is delayed or avoided, people drift, and drift erodes performance and trust. In stretch cultures, feedback is normal, specific, and timely. It's not punitive, it's how we're all developing. Over time, both giving and receiving feedback becomes less uncomfortable because it's expected and it's anchored in our growth. Fourth behavior is to model stretch as a leader. Leaders set the ceiling for growth. When you model learning, trying new things, reflecting out loud, you give others permission to do the same thing. Stretch cultures are built by leaders who are willing to grow alongside their teams, not ahead of them. So let's think through an example. Let's talk about delegating something high visibility. You may have an executive presentation that's coming up. Now, the leader could do it themselves. You could do it on your own. You know it would be more polished, but instead, try saying, I'm going to coach you through this. It's a stretch assignment and I'll support you. Then review their drafts, practice delivery with them, debrief afterward. You're modeling stretch by letting go of control, accepting that there might be some risk involved, but what you're really doing there is investing in someone else's growth. Let's keep going. So we've talked about mindset and behaviors. I want to talk a bit about the cultural expectations. The first expectation is that clarity is kindness. Clarity isn't harsh, it's humane. When people know where they stand and what matters, they can focus their energy productively. Stretch cultures value honest, respectful communication, even when it's uncomfortable. So let's do an example here. Without clarity, feedback can feel nice, but it isn't. So as a manager, you might say, "You're doing great overall. Just keep working on your executive presence." The employee leaves feeling like everything is fine until they're passed over for a promotion. That wasn't kind, that was vague. So, with clarity, the manager might say, "You're strong technically, and that's clear. Where I want to see growth is how you speak up in senior meetings. Specifically, I'd like you to contribute at least once per meeting and bring forward a recommendation, not just updates." That's clarity. It may feel uncomfortable in the moment, but it protects the employee's growth because clarity removes guessing. Expectation number two, ownership is expected. Growth requires responsibility, and when leaders overfunction, teams underfunction. When leaders consistently step in to rescue, teams learn dependency. When leaders hold standards and trust people with ownership, confidence grows. Ownership develops stronger leaders, stronger teams, and protects against burnout at the top. Expectation number three, in a stretch culture, recovery is expected. Stretch only works when it's sustainable. High performance is rhythmic, not relentless. Capacity doesn't grow through constant output. It grows through cycles of effort and recovery. Healthy cultures respect boundaries. They prioritize what truly matters, not the opposite of it. I want to give you two examples because I think recovery is a challenging one. What about recovery after a major push? Let's say that your team has just delivered a high stakes presentation, or you've just gone through a product launch. The past 3 weeks might have required longer hours and intense focus. Here's what recovery looks like. You might say, "The last few weeks have required extra effort. Let's protect Friday afternoons for deep work or early wrap up." What does that mean? Let's get all non-urgent meetings off the calendar. Let's resequence some of our deadlines coming up. And you know what? The team's encouraged to take PTO without subtle guilt. And you acknowledge the push that they have made publicly. Recovery here isn't indulgence. It's really helping your team intentionally recalibrate. What about this other form of recovery after a mistake is made? You might call out when something didn't land well or end well, and the results were disappointing. Recovery in this situation might look like a structured debrief where you look at what worked and what didn't. What did you learn and what are we going to do differently? Embedded in that debrief is no shaming language, no long-term label attached to the mistake, and clear next steps. Recovery after a mistake means let's learn and then close the loop. Let's not let failure linger emotionally on your team. I think in one sentence, recovery is the intentional restoration of capacity after exertion. Recovery means we don't demand peak output indefinitely. So let's think about where we've been in the last few minutes. A culture that chooses stretch is not a culture of pressure. It's a culture of increasing capacity, where people become more capable and more confident over time. This kind of culture doesn't happen accidentally, it happens on purpose. It's built when leaders shift how they view discomfort, when clear and consistent leadership behaviors are practiced, and when we set expectations that support both growth and well being. When those behaviors become normal and repeatable, culture starts to change. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you're building manager effectiveness, strengthening your leadership bench, or working toward a healthier performance culture, our coaching work can support that. Scan the QR codes to learn more, or reach out if you'd like to explore what coaching could look like for your leaders or your teams. We don't remove discomfort, we lead people through it. Thanks again for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day.